tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Richard Loppnow, Loppnow.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Attorney Lassay.
Sergeant Loppnow, just again refreshing your information for the jury, your position with the Sheriff's Office
I'm a sergeant with the investigative division.
and your role into investigating the Nicole Vanderheiden case was.
Initially, I responded to the scene where Nicole was located, and then since then, I've had further follow-up roles.
As part of your follow-up role, did you have involvement in writing search warrants to obtain records from Google relative to Mr. Burch?
Yes, I did.
And how did that come about?
Through the investigation, we were able to locate Mr. Burch's Google Gmail account in police records. Based on that Gmail account, I completed a search warrant to Google for location data specifically.
And what was,
Judge, we would object at this time for the reasons stated many times before, and we would ask that it be a continued objection throughout this process.
All right, the court will note the continuing objection, which is tantamount to having counsel object to every question during this line of testimony. By noting a continuing objection, counsel won't have to object to every question. So the continuing objection is noted. Pursuant to the court's previous ruling on this issue, the court will overrule the objection, and the questions can continue along this issue. Of course, you may object on other grounds during the course of the testimony. And Detective Loppnow, I'm going to ask that you speak up so the jury can hear you. Go ahead, Attorney Lassay.
and the information regarding Mr. Burch's Gmail address, where was that obtained?
Through the Green Bay Police records as a result of the crash investigation that was done.
There was a forensic download done of Mr. Burch's phone at that time,
Yes,
and you obtained his Gmail address from that forensic download?
yes.
Okay. And what did you do then to obtain the follow-up records from Google?
I applied for a search warrant based on that Gmail address, which was subsequently approved, and then I submitted that to Google.
Did Google respond to your request?
Yes, they did.
And did they provide all of the data that you had requested, including location data for that Gmail address?
Yes, they did.
And what format did you receive that in?
There was an Excel spreadsheet listing out dates and times as well as coordinates, longitude and latitude in that Excel spreadsheet.
When Google provided the data to you, did they also provide a certification
Yes, they did.
as to the authenticity of the data itself?
Yes.
Did you receive the information from Google in a paper format?
No, I received it via email, so electronically.
And what did you do with it when you received it?
I downloaded the data, made a disk of it to be turned into evidence at the sheriff's office, and then I also downloaded the data so I could review it.
Sergeant Loppnow, I'm showing you where it's been marked as Exhibit 158. Can you identify that?
This is the letter I received when I received the information from Google regarding that information that was sent to me.
And 159, can you identify that for the jury as well?
159 is the certificate of authenticity that I received also from Google regarding the information.
And what is Exhibit 160, Sergeant?
Exhibit 160 is a DVD disc containing that information that I received from Google.
And you put the information on that disk?
Yes, I did.
And you believe it's a true and accurate copy of the information that you received directly from Google?
Yes.
I would move for the admission of those exhibits, Your Honor.
Any objection to 158, 159, and 160 subject to cross?
No.
Can I see 158 and 159, please? All right. Exhibits 158, 159, and 160 are received. You may continue.
Your Honor, can I approach?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We had a discussion about presentation of other documents through this witness and when that's going to come in. And so I think we figured out a mutual acceptable schedule. So now we may continue with this questioning of Detective Loppnow.
Your Honor, Sergeant Loppnow, after you received that information from Google, did you review the information on the spreadsheet yourself, or what did you do with it?
I did view the information. There was information on there, I believe it was in universal time, so the timestamp was off. So it was difficult to make sense of the exact date and times compared to the locations given. So at that point, we involved our crime analyst, Tyler Balin, to assist us in correcting that time and figuring out the exact location.
But you're understanding that that essentially is a spreadsheet that includes times, locations, and the way in which the location is determined?
Yes.
And you were able to view that on the spreadsheet?
Yes.
You then turned it over to Analyst Balin for further analysis?
Yes.
Did there come a time that you became involved in obtaining information regarding Doug Dietrich's Fitbit and records from Fitbit about Mr. Dietrich's activities?
Yes, there was.
And what was your involvement in that activity?
I completed a search warrant, which was subsequently approved and then submitted to Fitbit for records for Doug Dietrich's Fitbit device.
And did Fitbit respond to your request for information?
Yes, they did.
And did they provide documents to you responsive to your request?
They did.
And how did those documents come to you?
Via email, electronically, in the form of an Excel spreadsheet, which had several documents within that Excel spreadsheet showing the activity from the Fitbit.
And when you received those documents electronically, what did you do with them?
Initially, I downloaded them to a disk to be turned into evidence at the sheriff's office, and I also retained a copy for my own records to review.
Did you review those documents?
Yes, I did.
Did you do anything further with them in addition to reviewing them?
We reviewed the documents. I believe they were also turned over to Tyler Balin, the crime analyst.
Sergeant Loppnow, I'm showing you it's been marked as Exhibit 161. Can you indicate what that document is?
Exhibit 161 is a copy of the certification letter that was sent from Fitbit verifying the documents that they had sent me.
And 162?
162 is a DVD disc containing the information that I received from Fitbit.
And did you generate that disk
Yes, I did.
based on the information that you had received directly from Fitbit?
Yes.
And you believe it's a true and accurate copy of the information that you received from Fitbit?
Yes.
I would move for the admissions of 162, 161 and 162. I would note on 162, it does include multiple documents. One is the spreadsheet of information from Fitbit. That is the information that we're actually seeking to move into evidence. There are other documents on there, including some charts or a report from Fitbit, which we are not moving into evidence, but they're all on the same disk, and the reason they're presented on this disk is that that disk is the entirety of what was received.
Right, any objection to 161, Attorney Schuckert, subject to cross?
161 is the affidavit. I think for all of these, we have that standing objection. So even when I say no objection, I guess that means no objection to any other grounds. We have all those continued objections, which I think were 6, 7, or 8 in number. In terms of 162, that specific file on the disk is labeled Report of Findings on Doug Dietrich Final 19 SEFT 2017.
Well, I'm just dealing with 161 right now. Let me just look at it briefly. All right, so the court understands you have a continuing objection. No other grounds for objection as to 161 subject to cross?
No, thank you.
Then 161 is received. Now as to 162, it's being offered, but with the understanding that only the spreadsheet information is really going to be presented. And this has been discussed earlier, knowing that any other objections subject to cross to the receipt of 162, that DVD disc.
No, Your Honor.
All right. 162 is received. And you can continue, Attorney Lassay.
Sergeant Loppnow, with respect to the Fitbit data, were you asked to do any further analysis on that data yourself and comparing it to known samples of Mr. Dietrich's activity?
Yes, I was. We had the videotape interviews of Mr. Dietrich, in which he's on video with his Fitbit on his wrist. So I was asked to compare the data that we received from Fitbit to what was viewed in those videos.
Can you describe for the jury how you went about doing that?
I had the copy of the video. I guess to give you an example, I have two screens on my computer, so I had the video on one screen and I had the Excel spreadsheet of the Fitbit data on the other screen, so I was comparing them side by side.
The Excel spreadsheet of the Fitbit data, how is that organized?
There's several spreadsheets within that document. The one I used to compare was labeled steps by minute. So for example, there's also a spreadsheet in that document labeled distance by minute, I believe, and a couple other ones, but I used the one detailing the steps recorded per minute.
So really what you were interested in is comparing the number of steps on the Fitbit report to the number of steps that you were able to potentially observe Mr. Dietrich taking on the videos that you were watching.
Yes, that's correct.
When you received the information from Fitbit, was that initially in UTC or was that in Central Standard Time?
I believe it was Central Standard Time.
And were you able to adequately come to a conclusion about the accuracy of that data based on looking at it and comparing it to the known data on the video?
Yes, I was.
Did you watch the entirety of Mr. Dietrich's recorded interviews?
I did.
And those were two separate recorded interviews, is that correct?
Yes, the first interview by Sergeant Holschbach with her initial interview of Doug at his residence, as well as a follow-up interview at the Sheriff's Office by Detective Kingston and Deputy Caters.
And the first interview at Mr. Dietrich's house, how long was that interview?
I believe it was about 2 hours.
So you were able to view minute by minute Mr. Dietrich's activities and compare them to each minute of the recorded activities from Fitbit?
Yes, I was.
And the interview again at the Sheriff's Office, how long was that?
About 3 hours.
And were you able to do the same thing with respect to that data, compare the information minute by minute from Fitbit to your minute by minute observations of Mr. Dietrich's activities?
Yes, I did.
Is it fair to say that during large portions of each of those videos, there is no activity by Mr. Dietrich, either that he's seated or not moving?
Yes.
And when Mr. Dietrich is seated or not moving, what is the Fitbit registering?
It's registering that there are no steps being taken.
And that is reported in minute by minute data?
Yes.
0 steps per minute?
Yes.
Did you note any instances where Mr. Dietrich was not moving, but the Fitbit was registering activity?
There was a couple instances. One I recall during the initial interview by Sergeant Steffens at his residence. He pulls his phone out of his pocket. You can see his hands moving. He's not necessarily taking steps, but he's showing Sergeant Holschbach the phone. At that point, there are several steps recorded. Also, I remember in the interview at the Sheriff's Office, there are times when he begins talking with his hands. So he's still seated, but he's moving his hands quite a bit. And at that point, there are some steps registered.
When you say some steps, are you saying 20, 50, or is it 2 or 3?
I don't remember the amount. It was maybe 8 or 10 steps at most. I don't recall. I'd have to review my notes.
Do you have a report that specifically outlined those instances where there were discrepancies?
Yes, I do.
If you were able to review your report, would that allow you to refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Sergeant Loppnow, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 163. Can you identify what that document is?
This is the report I generated from reviewing the video interviews and comparing them with the Fitbit data.
I'm not going to ask you to read from that report. What I'd ask you to do is review the report, and after you're done reviewing it, let me know if it refreshes your recollection.
I've reviewed the document, thank you.
And out of you indicated that it was more than 5 hours total of video that you observed?
It was right about 5 hours, I think a little bit over,
So that's roughly 300 minutes, is that accurate?
approximately.
Out of the 300 individual minutes that you noted, how many times did you observe a discrepancy between Mr. Dietrich not actually taking steps where you observed the Fitbit registering steps?
I believe there was about 3 times I observed that. And in those cases, he was moving his hands, but not necessarily moving his feet or taking steps.
Where's the Fitbit device affixed to his body if you could observe it?
It was on his left wrist.
So actually it registers wrist movement, correct?
Correct.
In addition, were there instances where you could observe Mr. Dietrich taking steps where the device was not registering any activity?
There was a couple instances of that. I believe in the initial interview by Sergeant Holschbach, there was times when he was seated in close proximity to where she was seating when they were completing a written statement. He does lean forward and get up to show her a phone. I believe that happened once or twice where no steps were registered. In reviewing the video, he's leaning forward from, I believe it was a bar stool in the kitchen and stepping towards her to show her the phone, but not taking steps, so to speak, or making any jerky movements.
And that's a situation where Mr. Dietrich may have taken 1 or 2 steps forward, but the device did not register any activity.
Yes.
And you said that happened on 2 or 3 occasions in that video?
I believe it was once or twice in that video, and then in the video from the sheriff's office in his follow-up interview, there was a couple of occasions where he actually stood up, took a drink of his beverage, I believe, stretched, and then sat down. So at that point, no steps were recorded. I believe there was also another instance where he got up to stretch and slowly paced a little bit in the interview room, and that also did not record any steps.
Were there instances in both videos, I'll take the first interview where Mr. Dietrich is at his home, where he is observed actually actively taking several steps?
Yes, there are.
And when he's observed actively taking several steps, did the device register those steps according to the data you obtained from Fitbit?
Yes, it did.
In the second video at the sheriff's office, are there instances when Mr. Dietrich actually got up, took steps, and left the room?
There was.
And again, during those instances, was the device registering those steps when he got up and actively left the room?
Yes, it did.
In summation, then it's fair to say that in the roughly 300 minutes, or 300 individual data sections that you reviewed, there were less than 10 discrepancies between the data and your observations.
Yes, I believe that would be accurate.
And in each of those situations where there was a discrepancy, there was an explanation for that, either wrist movement where he didn't take steps, or very slow movement where it wasn't registering steps.
Yes.
No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
Yes, thank you. Sergeant Loppnow, I just want to focus on this Fitbit data a little bit. So you said that you were able to watch the videos that were available to the Brown County Sheriff's Office of Doug Dietrich, correct?
Yes.
And you said it was about 2 hours on May 21st and 3 hours on May 22nd?
If I remember correctly, yes.
So I know lawyers are pretty bad at math, but I'm going to try to do this. So as the state was saying, the minutes you were able to watch, that also means that, so there's 22 hours that you weren't able to identify any sort of Fitbit data and compare it to what Doug Dietrich was actually doing on video, correct?
Can you clarify what you're asking?
So you watched 2 hours on May 21st? 2 hours
Yes.
of video?
Correct.
And there's 22 hours of time that you didn't watch?
That's correct. For this report, I was specifically comparing the data to the times that were on record that we had recorded.
So then just to put it in terms of minutes, that's 1,320 minutes of time that you yourself did not watch.
That's possible. I would need a calculator to confirm that.
Me too. And then same thing on May 22nd, so there's 3 hours you watched, but that also means that there's 21 hours that you don't have accounted for, correct?
Correct.
So then that's 1,260 minutes,
Again,
or around there.
yes, very possible, yes.
So in total, that's 2,580 or right around there minutes that you didn't watch yourself.
Again, I can't give you exact numbers, but approximately, yes.
And you said that there was some errors in the Fitbit data, but they were minor in your opinion?
There were those small inconsistencies, as we discussed, in watching the video compared to those times when it did record a couple steps. Mr. Dietrich is seen moving his hands at that time with the Fitbit on his wrist. A couple instances also, as we discussed, when he was taking steps, a couple steps, there wasn't a lot of motion. There were very slow movements, and at that time it did not record.
So those were errors in the data, albeit minor.
Yes.
And then I know you're trying to explain why those errors didn't happen. Do you have the technological background to be able to diagnose those errors? Or is that
No.
just your lay opinion on it?
I'm describing what I viewed in the video compared to the records, just that.
Okay. Do you have a background in technology where you can tell us how a Fitbit operates?
No, I don't.
Can you tell us how the Fitbit app operates?
No, I can't.
Okay. If somebody's not wearing a Fitbit device, does that mean that they are likely not recording steps then?
I would believe if the Fitbit device is not being worn, it's not recording steps, yes.
Have you done any further research into Fitbit to familiarize yourself with it?
No, I haven't.
Sergeant Loppnow, I then want to just back up with you further than what the state did. Back in June, you had returned from Madison and you were still the lead investigator in this case, correct? Or a co-lead investigator?
Yeah, at that time, Sergeant Slinger had officially taken that lead role.
And on June 3rd, you obtained a search warrant to download the data of Doug Dietrich's phone?
Yes, I believe so.
And Doug Dietrich's phone was a Samsung Galaxy S4, correct?
I believe it was.
And his phone number was 920-621-0593?
I don't recall that specifically.
If I show you your report, will that refresh your memory?
Yes, it would. That is the number listed for Douglas Dietrich's contact information in our report management system.
Thank you. And then did you execute that search warrant?
Yes, I did.
And can you describe how that process worked?
After having the search warrant approved, the phone was turned over to crime analyst Tyler Balin, and he performed an extraction of the phone at that time.
And then that extraction would have been put into evidence at the Brown County Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
And then it's stored pretty much there throughout the course of the investigation?
It's in evidence. I believe Tyler also keeps working copies for review.
And then that information would eventually be sent to the defense as part of discovery?
I believe it would, yes.
And then in July and September, did you also collect DNA samples from Adam Kolpak and Matt Wazenberg?
Yes, I believe I did.
And they gave you consent to take those DNA samples?
Yes.
And can you just identify the report that I showed you earlier?
The one you provided me is a report that I completed on the service of the search warrant on Mr. Dietrich's phone on June 3rd.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
Sergeant Loppnow, just briefly, you were asked about all of the hours on May 21st for which you did not review any video surveillance of Doug Dietrich. Is that because you didn't have video surveillance of those time periods?
For much of those time periods, yes.
On the 21st, so on May 21st, that's Saturday, the only known surveillance video or video information that you have from Mr. Dietrich is the recordings that Sergeant Holzbach took at at his house, is that correct?
Yes,
And likewise, on May 22nd of 2016, the only known video recorded time periods you have for Mr. Dietrich are the 3 hours that were at the Brown County Sheriff's Office, is that correct?
yes, I believe so.
So it's not as if you intentionally failed to review other video. These are the only time periods for which you have known video surveillance of Mr. Dietrich, when you can observe that he's wearing his Fitbit and you have accurate timestamps.
That's correct.
I have no questions, Your Honor.
Navy Cross?
A little. So Sergeant Loppnow, I know you didn't have surveillance video for those times, but essentially what I was trying to drive home is that means that you're not able to verify that Fitbit data at those periods of time that we went over, correct?
Correct. The time I was able to verify is specifically what we had on video.
Do you have a cell phone?
Yes, I do.
And when you call somebody, does it work most of the time?
In most cases, yes.
And then sometimes that technology just doesn't work for whatever reason?
At times,
You also send text messages with your cell phone?
yes.
And sometimes, or most of the times, I imagine that works?
Most of the time, yes.
And then sometimes it just doesn't work?
At times, yes.
And then, again, same thing with, say, GPS. Have you ever used a GPS device?
Yes, I have.
And that works most of the time?
Yes,
And then sometimes it doesn't work?
at times.
And again, with the Fitbit, if somebody's not wearing it, it will not provide information that'll be used, correct? Or show step data?
Yeah, I would conclude that if it's not being worn, it's not recording any of that information.
Nothing further.
Any redirect? All right. Attorney Lassay, did you need your break at this time? All right. We're going to take an earlier break than usual this morning, ladies and gentlemen. Gentlemen, we'll be back 10 to 15 minutes. Because it doesn't do anyone any good if nothing is being heard. You are the triers of fact, all right? Thank you. Attorney Lassay, you can continue with your case.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Tyler Balin.
Officer Balin, if you come forward, and Jody will swear you in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Tyler Balin, last name Behling.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Attorney Lassay. That's nice and loud.
All right. Mr. Balin, can you state for the record how you are employed?
I am employed as a computer forensic crime analyst with the Brown County Sheriff's Office.
Can you describe what a computer forensic crime analyst does?
I am responsible for examining any digital items of evidence and reviewing any kind of digital record from a telecommunications company or internet-based service.
And how long have you been doing that type of work for the Brown County Sheriff's Office?
Since November of 2014.
Do you have any specialized training or experience in that area?
I do. I have specialized training from the FBI, the DEA, and the United States Department of Justice as it relates to crime analysis.
And is that an ongoing on-the-job education as well?
Yes, it is.
What are your day-to-day tasks?
Day to day, I analyze computers, tablets, cell phones, and any kind of digital record as it relates to them.
Can you estimate approximately how many phones or computers you have analyzed over the course of your time with the Sheriff's Office?
Well over 1,000.
At some point in your role as a forensic analyst with the Sheriff's Office, did you become involved in the investigation into the death of Nicole Vanderheiden?
Yes, I did.
And what was your initial responsibility with respect to that investigation?
My initial duties, as regards to this case, I examined cell phones initially.
Do you recall approximately how many cell phones you analyzed at the outset of this case?
In total,
Yes.
probably close to a dozen.
And did you begin your involvement right early on in this case on May 21st of 2016?
Yes, I did.
And you were asked to do some cell phone downloads at that time?
That's correct.
Do you recall which phones you were provided on the 21st?
I examined an iPhone 4 that belonged to Greg Matthew, and an iPhone 6 that belonged to Dallas Kennedy.
And were you asked to analyze additional phones on May 22nd, 2016?
Yes, I was.
Which phones did you analyze on that date?
Can I refer to my notes?
If that will refresh your recollection, yes.
I did 4 phones in total on the 22nd. A Samsung Galaxy S4 belonging to Doug Dietrich, a Samsung Galaxy S7 belonging to Nicole Vanderheyden, a Motorola Max XT1250 belonging to Aaron Kolinsky, and an iPhone 6S belonging to Darcy Lipsky.
When you talk about conducting a forensic analysis of a phone, can you describe for the jury what you do, what steps you undertake to conduct that analysis?
Yes. At the Sheriff's Office, we have specialized hardware and software that allows us to copy all the data from the cell phone in order to use specialized software to review what's contained on that cell phone.
And what types of software do you utilize to analyze phones?
Typically, it's the Celebrite system.
Can you describe what Celebrite does?
Celebrite is programmed to identify the phone and identify the contents of the phone to be able to copy that data from the phone and then put it in a displayable format to make it easy to review.
Celebrite a program that you use regularly in your work?
Yes, it is.
Is that the system that you use to analyze most phones?
The majority of them, yes.
There are different types of devices, is that correct? Apple phones versus Android phones. Can you describe how the analysis of each might be different?
There's different profiles built within Celebrite to analyze different models of phones. So specifically on an Android, it might gather information that's not available from an Apple device or vice versa.
Does Celebrite allow you to obtain information from apps on phones as well?
Yes, it does.
Are there specialized subsets of that Celebrite program that allow you to look at individual apps?
Yes, there is.
Is Celebrite a software that is constantly updating?
Celebrate's updated several times a year, depending on the progression of different apps that come to the market.
And are you provided with ongoing training on how to use that program relative to the updates?
Yes, I am.
How is that training provided?
It's provided online through the manufacturer of the Celebrate system.
Every time they give you an update in terms of how to obtain data from an app, they also instruct you how to use it?
Yeah, there are release notes related to each upgrade.
For someone with your training and experience level, is that online education fairly common?
Yes, it is.
It's fairly easy for you to understand and
Yes,
follow?
it is.
Specifically, when you're doing the analysis of these phones on May 21st and May 22nd, what type of information are you looking for?
Initially, during the investigation, we were looking at mainly the last activity that occurred on the phone, whether it be calls, texts, anything within the time frame of the night of the 20th into the early morning hours of the 21st.
So is it fair to say that you work in conjunction with the investigators? They provide you with information that might be relevant, and then you're asked to potentially find information on those phones that would corroborate or contradict the information that's being provided by witnesses?
That's correct.
You share your information when you receive it with the investigators?
Yes, I do.
Specifically, when you downloaded Nicole Vanderheyden's phone, what type of information were you looking for?
We were looking for the last activity that occurred on that phone, whether it be a call or a text, anything really at that point.
Do you recall approximately what time on the 20th or the 21st of May 2016 you observed the last known activity from Ms. Vanderheyden's phone?
I believe it was right around midnight.
When a phone is powered off or shut off, is there an entry that you're able to locate using the Celebrite program to see if a phone is powered off?
If the phone is powered off by the user, that would create a log entry that the device was powered down.
If the phone is not manually powered off, but rather runs out of battery life, is that an activity that is logged in the Celebrite program?
That would not be logged, as the operating system of the device doesn't have the opportunity to create that log as the battery dies.
Were you able to observe Nikki's phone being manually shut off in the early morning hours on May 21st of 2016?
I was not.
You were also indicated earlier that on May 22nd of 2016 you were asked to analyze Doug Dietrich's cell phone. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And again, what sort of information are you looking for in your analysis of Doug Dietrich's cell phone?
Again, the initial investigation of that device would be anything within the time frame of the night of the 20th into the early morning hours of the 21st, whether it be calls, texts, any activity that would have occurred on that device.
And did you also look for activity that occurred throughout the day on the 21st prior to the receipt of the phone?
Yes, we did.
Were you looking for call logs with respect to Mr. Dietrich?
Yes,
Text messages?
correct.
Any other type of messaging or communication system information?
Correct.
So emails,
Yes,
Facebook Messenger?
yes,
Did you observe any of those types of activities, calls,
Yes.
messages, and Facebook activity?
yes,
And you provided your observations to the investigators?
that's correct.
Now, were you asked to actually analyze the report yourself, or did you give the report to the investigators to have them look at it?
I would have created a copy of the report for them to review, but then I would also conduct my own analysis on that data.
Are there occasions where you do simply turn over the report to law enforcement or officers and have them look at it?
Yes,
But in this particular instance, in addition to turning over a copy, you conducted an analysis yourself?
that's correct.
With respect to Doug Dietrich's phone, were you able to note the last time that any activity was logged in the early morning hours of May 21st of 2016?
Yes, I was.
And what was that last activity?
I believe it was a Facebook call or message at approximately 3:07 a.m.
Do you know the party to whom that message was sent?
I believe it was sent to Dallas Kennedy.
And again, with respect to a manual power off, if the phone had been manually powered off, is that something that would have logged on Cellbrite?
Yes, it is.
Did you note a manual power off on Doug Dietrich's phone in the early morning hours of May 21st, 2016?
I did not.
And after that 3:07 a.m. contact, when is the next instance of affirmative activity on Doug Dietrich's cell phone?
I believe it's not until sometime the following day.
In the afternoon on that date?
Correct.
In fact, if you were able to refer to your notes, would that allow you to refresh your recollection as to the next time?
Yes.
And while you're looking through your notes, I asked you about Cellbrite logging manual power offs. Does Cellbrite also log a manual power on?
Yes, it would.
And do you know if a manual power on was noted on the Cellbrite program for Doug Dietrich's phone on May 21st of 2016?
I believe it was.
Do you recall the time, after looking at your notes, of the manual power on for Mr. Dietrich's phone?
It looks like the first activity on that device on the 21st would be 2:44 p.m.
And do you have a timestamp for when the phone was manually powered on?
2:42 p.m.
I guess perhaps I haven't explained this well enough for the jury, but could you describe what it is to manually power the phone off or manually power it on?
Of course. So to manually turn off a phone, you'd hold down, on most devices, you'd hold down the power button until that device fully powers down. Same process to manually turn it on. If the phone is off, you'd hold the power button down until that device turns on.
When you do a Cellbrite analysis on a phone, is it possible for you to receive or view activity that occurred retroactively while the phone was powered off?
Yes, it is.
Can you describe that process?
Yes, so if you're logged into any kind of social media or messaging account for multiple devices, for example, if you're logged into an email account on a computer and that same email on the phone, you were to send an email from the computer and later power on your phone, you would view that message in the outbox of your email on the phone. Being that those two devices are signed into the same account, that data is all synced together.
So for example, if Mr. Dietrich was utilizing his computer to send messages or emails on an account to which he was logged in on the phone, and he was doing that during a time period that the phone was powered off, when he powers the phone back on, you're able to actually use the phone itself to collect data that was sent using a different device.
That's correct.
So for example, if Mr. Dietrich testified that he sent messages using a computer device at 11 a.m., we know his phone wasn't on until 2:42 p.m., using your phone analysis, you're actually still able to see the data that he sent using the computer.
That's correct.
So in fact, were you able to observe that Mr. Dietrich was affirmatively engaging in messaging activity on his computer during a time when his phone was powered off?
Yes, I was.
And what types of messages or communication was Mr. Dietrich engaging in the early morning or in the morning hours of May 21st of 2016?
Facebook Messenger.
So he was using that application using another device?
Yes.
And I guess I used the term app earlier also. Can you explain for the jury what an app is?
An app is short for application or a piece of software that you would download to put on your device or phone.
What are some common communication applications?
Facebook Messenger, Kik, WhatsApp. Most people are familiar with iMessage. It comes standard on an iPhone.
So in terms of your observations, and I'm not asking you for specific content, but is it true that in the late morning hours of May 21st of 2016 that Mr. Dietrich is engaging in messaging to various parties, Dallas Kennedy, Heather Meyer, in an attempt to locate Nikki?
That's correct.
And you're able to observe those communications that were sent from another device?
That's correct.
And then you indicated at about 2:42 p.m., that's when the phone was manually powered on, correct?
That's correct.
Are there messages that he's sending to individuals that are consistent with the phone then being powered on in that time frame?
That's correct.
And is it fair to say that once that phone is powered on at 2:42 p.m., there is then a flurry of activity on that phone that it appears to be an attempt to locate Nicole?
That is correct.
And after 2:42 p.m. is the first time that you see any flurry of activity sent from the phone itself, correct?
That's correct.
With respect to Mr. Dietrich's phone, did you become aware that Mr. Dietrich was wearing a Fitbit device?
Yes, I did.
Did you locate the Fitbit app on his phone?
I did.
Do you recall when the first time you looked at that Fitbit app?
Can I refer to my notes?
If it would assist your recollection, yes.
That would have been sometime in June of 2016.
And when you looked at the Fitbit app in June of 2016, in what capacity did you review the data on the Fitbit?
I reviewed it manually on the device as if a user would be viewing it on their device.
So you actually went to the app on the phone?
Correct.
Are there limitations in terms of what a user can observe on the app?
There are.
Analyzing it forensically using your software, would that allow you to look at more detailed information?
That's correct.
But you did not do that in June of 2016?
I did not.
When you made your observations in June of 2016 on the device itself, what did you note at that time? Did you do a detailed report?
I did not. I reviewed the data on the phone and analyzed it in comparison to statements that were previously given by Mr. Dietrich, and everything that I could view directly on the device and lined up with what had previously been stated.
Stated by Mr. Dietrich, correct?
That's correct.
Did you at some point in time take a closer look at the Fitbit app using a forensic tool?
Yes, I did.
Was a forensic tool available for you to have taken a closer look in June of 2016?
At that time, no, there was not.
And who produces the software that allows you to take a forensic look at the Fitbit app?
The manufacturer of the software is Magnet Forensics.
And and what is the name of the software tool?
Axiom.
At some point, was there an update that allowed you to look at that app more closely?
Yes, there was.
And after that update came out, did you do an additional analysis of the phone?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe what you did in order to provide a more detailed account of the information on the Fitbit app?
I was, at that time, extracted the data from the device again and processed it with the Magnet Forensic Axiom software, which has the ability to parse out the information from the application on the device and put it in a usable format where someone could review that information.
And at least with respect to the relevant timeframes, when you took a look at that data using the Axiom software, was it consistent with what you had initially observed in June of 2016?
Yes, it was.
At some point in time, were you aware that the Brown County Sheriff's Office had received records directly from Fitbit outlining Mr. Dietrich's step activity?
Yes, I am.
And did you have an opportunity to compare the data received from Fitbit to the data that you extracted from the app on Mr. Dietrich's phone?
Yes, I did.
And was that information consistent?
Yes, it was.
Are those reported in the same way or in a different way?
They're slightly different in how they're reported. With the forensic tool that I had access to, it broke down the data in 15-minute increments as far as the count of steps. So it showed every 15 minutes how many steps were within that time frame. When we received the data from Fitbit, they took it a step further, and their steps were broken down on a minutely basis. So every minute they had a recording of how many steps had taken place.
So then you were able to compare the minute-by-minute data, add up 15-minute chunks to be consistent with what you had extracted, and when you compared those two data sets together, they were consistent.
They were the same.
As part of your preparation for this case, did you have an opportunity to create some demonstrative evidence, essentially graphs, that show Mr. Dietrich's step activity during relevant timeframes?
Yes, I did.
Mr. Balin, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 165. Can you identify that exhibit?
This is a graph of Fitbit steps from 5/20/2016 at 7 p.m. up till 5/21/2016 at 5:30 p.m.
And is that based on the data that you obtained directly from Fitbit?
Yes, it is.
But again, that's consistent with the data that you also extracted from Mr. Dietrich's phone.
That's correct.
And 166, can you describe for the jury what that is?
This is a graph of Fitbit step data from 5/21/2016, 2:30 a.m. to 6:30 a.m.
And again, is that a graph that you created
Yes, it is.
based on the information that you received from Fitbit, but consistent with the information you extracted from Mr. Dietrich's phone?
That's correct.
You want to move for admission of those exhibits and ask for permission to publish?
Can I see, well, you're going to publish them? Well, can I see those for a second? All right, any objection to 165 and 166 subject to cross?
No, Your Honor.
All right. 165 and 166 are received, and they may be published at this time on the screen.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Balin, what's being displayed to the jury now is that Exhibit 165,
Yes, it is.
and that's a graph that indicates Mr. Dietrich's step activity from May 20th, 2016 at about 7 p.m. until May 21st, 2016 at about, is that 4:49 p.m. is the last number on the right?
That's correct.
And this is something, again, you prepared?
Yes, it is.
In terms of the numbers of steps, you have, I think, 0 through 120 listed. Did you select the number in terms of how high you needed to go?
I did not.
Okay.
That's automatically generated by Excel when you create this chart.
And if Mr. Dietrich had taken, so you used Excel to generate this?
That's correct.
That's a program you're familiar with and
Yes,
use
sir.
regularly? If Mr. Dietrich had in fact taken more steps in any particular minute, if he was running and took 200 steps in a minute, the graph automatically would have increased that higher number?
That's correct.
So while we see spikes, those spikes are based on the number of steps taken, not based on any other extraneous factor?
That's correct.
And then if I could view 166. And then Mr. Balin, is what's displayed on the screen, we're actually going to reduce the size a little bit. On 166, are there numbers on the left side of the graph that indicate the number of steps in the
Yes,
exhibit in
there are.
front of you? Okay. Your Honor, that was not displaying on there, so we're attempting to reduce the size of the visual so that the numbers display.
That's fine. It's just a different version of 166 for the record, right?
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Just for the record, what's being shown now on the screen is still the 166 is just an expanded version of that graph showing the numbers on the left. Is that right?
The 166 is as the form that Mr. Balin can view now. What was displayed up there earlier was expanded too much so that you couldn't see the numbers. What's now displayed actually does include the entire exhibit. And then, Mr. Balin, what we were talking about in terms of the number of steps before on this particular graph from 2:30 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. on May 21st of 2016, we'll actually note that the graph tops out at 60 steps. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's because essentially at no point during that time frame does Mr. Dietrich have more than 50 steps in any minute.
That's correct.
So the graph could be compressed.
That's correct.
And then this displays his activity on the far left at 2:30 in the morning until the far right 6:30 a.m. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
I'm going to ask you to use a pointer here because I know the times are actually pretty small. I don't know that the jury can actually sit and observe the times. Could you point to the last time that Mr. Dietrich's Fitbit is registering steps before 3:10 a.m.? And roughly what time is that?
308, between 308 and 309.
And then between that time frame and 6 in the morning, are there any instances where Mr. Dietrich is registering steps according to that data?
There are at approximately 4:18 a.m. Right here.
And about how many steps is it registering at that time?
Roughly 12.
And then there are 3 separate minutes where Mr. Dietrich is logging some activity between, right around that time frame, between 4:18 and 4:20 roughly?
That's correct.
And those are very few steps.
That's correct.
And then the next time that Mr. Dietrich registers, Mr. Dietrich's device registers any steps is what, approximately what time?
Approximately 6:09 a.m.
And that's what's depicted on the far right of the graph.
That's correct.
And then all the locations where there are no bars, does that mean that the spreadsheet actually logged 0 steps?
That's correct.
And again, that's consistent with the data that you extracted from the phone directly as well.
That's correct.
And as part of your work in this case, were you asked to assist investigators with comparing the data from Fitbit, both in terms of the extracted data or the data from Fitbit directly, to known video recorded activities of Mr. Dietrich?
Yes, I was.
And what was your role in that?
Created a demonstrative video from a segment of video that was taken at the Brown County Sheriff's Office and compared it to the data that we received from Fitbit.
In addition to creating that demonstrative video, did you make any attempts to observe surveillance footage and make comparisons to the Fitbit data?
Yes, I did.
And what surveillance video did you attempt to observe?
From the sardine can.
And were you able to affirmatively or definitively make any conclusions regarding that?
I was not.
And why is that?
The timestamp on the video from the sardine can wasn't accurate. We had a rough idea of approximately how many minutes it was off, but I couldn't lock it down to the exact second.
So based on your inability to come up with exact times on that timestamp, you weren't comfortable drawing any conclusions in comparing the surveillance video to the Fitbit data that you received?
That's correct.
Did you observe the entire sardine can video?
I did.
And did you actually attempt to compare that to the Fitbit data that you obtained?
Yes, I did.
Is it largely consistent?
It is largely consistent.
But again, you weren't able to form a specific conclusion because you weren't comfortable with a specific time frame.
Correct.
Did you make any other comparisons with respect to Mr. Dietrich's Fitbit data and other data points?
Yes, I did.
What did you do?
I compared the data that we received from Fitbit with the data that we would have received from Google.
And did it again appear to be consistent?
It did.
Back to the demonstrative video that you created, which surveillance video of Mr. Dietrich did you use to create that demonstrative?
Yeah, we approach.
Go right ahead. Our sidebar had to do with this aspect of the testimony.
Judge, the defense makes an objection to any comparison of Fitbit data to Google data based on foundation.
Due to the lack of foundation with the Google data, that objection is sustained. Jury is to disregard that last answer. All right? You may continue, Attorney Lassay.
Thank you. Back to the demonstrative video that you created, that was based on which set of surveillance?
It was a recorded interview at the Brown County Sheriff's Office.
So based on the fact that the interview was recorded at the Brown County Sheriff's Office, you were comfortable with the accuracy of the timestamp of that video?
Yes, I was.
And you were able to make comparisons from that video to the data that was obtained from Fitbit?
Yes, I was.
And did you also provide some assistance in allowing Sergeant Loppnow to make a comparison of that entire video to the Fitbit data set?
Yes, I did.
And you generated the bit of video that shows the overlay of the comparison?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe what you did to create that demonstrative?
Yes, I took a segment from the recorded interview at the Brown County Sheriff's Office that was timestamped in our records management system, and I compared that time frame to the data that was given to us by Fitbit and compared the two. So there will be, do you want me to describe the video?
Just briefly.
Okay. In the video, it will show the recorded interview, but also on the screen you will see the data from Fitbit and how it corresponds.
And then you, once you created that video, did you place that onto a DVD?
Yes, I did.
I would move for the admission. Actually, could you identify the exhibit that's in front of the clerk?
This is a DVD-R containing the Fitbit video of the recorded interview at the Brown County Sheriff's Office.
I would ask that that be admitted into evidence and ask for permission to show the video to the jury.
And the number on that exhibit?
167.
This is Exhibit 167, subject to cross. Any objection to its receipt at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay, 167 is received.
And, Your Honor, the video will be played without sound. The purpose, obviously, is not to get in the content of the conversation between Mr. Dietrich and the law enforcement officers, but merely to show activity as a demonstrative for the Fitbit data.
For those purposes, 167 can be shown with the volume turned down.
Your Honor, I would note for the record, obviously, we're starting the video at the beginning and we will play it through to the conclusion.
All right.
Analyst Balin, does the demonstrative video that was just shown accurately reflect the video that you created?
Yes, it does.
At some point in time, there was an indicator in there that you could see Mr. Dietrich's Fitbit. Were you able to view that on the video?
Yes, I was.
Did you watch through later in the video where he actually pulls up his sleeves and you're able to take an even more clear look at that Fitbit on his hand?
Yes, I did.
Do you recall which interview room that was at the Brown County Sheriff's Office?
I believe it was room 3.
Do you know how far it is from room 3 to the bathroom?
I don't.
Is that in pretty close proximity to the restroom?
It is.
And did he, do you recall in the sound of the video, did Mr. Dietrich actually ask to go use the restroom?
Yes, he did.
How is the layout there in front of the interview rooms and the bathroom? What is the layout of the sheriff's office there?
It's a hallway.
Does the hallway extend in both directions, not just to the bathroom, but further down?
That's correct.
Obviously, do you have any specific knowledge of where Mr. Dietrich went when he was off the video?
I do not.
In addition to your work assisting with the Fitbit, did you at some point later in this investigation become involved in downloading and analyzing additional phones subsequent to the arrest of George Burch?
Yes, I did.
And actually, even, I guess, prior to Mr. Burch's arrest, when the sheriff's office became aware of Mr. Burch, were you provided with a copy of a download of Mr. Burch's phone that had been done by the Green Bay Police Department?
Yes, I was.
Were you asked to analyze that download?
Yes, I was.
And was that done by Green Bay PD in a software that you were familiar with?
Yes.
Was it also Cellbrite?
Yes, it was.
What were you looking for when you were analyzing the download of Mr. Burch's phone?
Initially, we were looking for anything in the time frame of the night of the 20th into the morning hours of the 21st, whether it be calls, texts, internet history, any kind of location data available from that device.
First of all, internet history. Did you actually view internet history on Mr. Burch's phone from the time frame of this homicide?
Yes, I did.
Was there anything of note?
There was repeated visits to articles in regards to this case.
When you say repeated, do you know approximately how many times Mr. Burch looked up information on this case shortly after it happened?
About 64.
Now, when you talk about internet browser history, can you describe a little bit about what that is?
Yes, so the internet browser on a phone allows you to go and visit websites that are on the internet.
And when you see browser history, what are you actually viewing? Is that sites that were viewed? Are you actually seeing what he's actively searching? What is the...
You will see the link that was accessed along with the date and time that it was accessed, along with if there's a heading to the website such as the article title, that would all be viewed in the Cellbrite report.
Does each of those links that's viewed represent a separate click or a separate view on that particular page?
It does.
Analyst Balin, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 168. Can you describe what that document is?
This is a report generated out of the Cellbrite software of the internet browser history in regards to website links related to the case from Mr. Burch's phone.
And that is in reverse chronological order, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So the most recent views are on top,
That's correct.
and the last date visited according to this report is which date?
6/6 of 2016.
And the first view, which would be actually number 64 then on this report, what is the date of that view?
5/22/2016.
At what time?
5:19 a.m.
And the times listed on there, are those in Central Standard Time?
They are.
Your Honor, I would move for admission of this exhibit.
Any objection to 168, subject to cross?
No, thank you.
168 is received.
I would request the ability to publish this exhibit for the jury.
Let's publish 168 on the screen.
Your Honor, because it is in reverse chronological order, we would like to start publication beginning on page 3, which is the last page of the report.
All right, so this will be, for the record, this will be page 3 of Exhibit 168.
Correct.
All right.
And Balin, the writing is obviously very small on this particular exhibit. Is the title the same for numbers 55 through 64, which is all of the items on page 3?
Yes, they are.
And what is the title of the article?
Sheriff, body found near a field in Bellevue.
And then that is located on which website?
Fox 11 online.
And in fact, it appears that that was accessed several different times on the morning of May 22nd, 2016, between 5:19 a.m. and 11:48 a.m.
That's correct.
Page 2 of that report. And then on number 43 through number 54, which are the bottom several segments, is that again a reference to the same article?
With the exception of number 53, it is the same.
So all but 53 are reference to that same Fox 11 online article, again viewed between May 22nd, 2016 at 11:48 a.m. and May 23rd, 2016 at 5:56 a.m., correct?
That is correct.
Then item number 53, near the bottom of the page, that is entitled Death Investigation Underway in Bellevue - Story,
That is correct.
and that's on the NBC 26 website.
It is.
Item, that's what you already said. Item 42, what is that item?
That is a shortened URL link to a similar article.
And when you use the Celebrate program, are you actually able to go in and click on those links and access the story?
As long as the site hosting that story has not changed anything in their URL, I would be able to view it, yes.
So for many of these, were you able to do that?
Yes, I was.
And then in fact, 36 through 41, that is again a reference to the same sheriff, body found near a field in Bellevue story on Fox 11 online.
With the exception of 41, there's a slightly different URL, same title.
And again, those are on May 23rd, 2016.
Correct.
And there are several different searches on the 24th referencing different articles on, again, Nicole Vanderheiden's body being found and her family mourning her loss, correct?
That is correct.
In fact, information that a Ledgeview man has been arrested in his girlfriend's death is referenced in item number 28. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that's on May 24th of 2016.
Yes, it is.
And then referencing page 1. In several views between May 24th of 2016 at the bottom up to item number 8, which is May 31st of 2016. Those are various articles about this case. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then the top 7 inquiries all indicate the subheading, Police Seek Help in Ledgeview Murder Probe. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And those are accessed on June 5th, 2016 and June 6th, 2016.
That is correct.
During this time frame, were you able to search the web browser history from Mr. Burch to see whether he was interested in other types of news articles?
Yes, I was.
Did he have a similar interest in other local news stories?
He did not.
In fact, there were very few references to any other local news stories,
There were very few.
and same thing with any national news stories. Very
That's
few
correct.
references. When you reviewed Mr. Burch's phone download that was provided by the Green Bay Police Department, were you also looking for any potential connection to Nicole Vanderheiden or Douglas Dietrich?
Yes, I was.
did you locate any connection between them in terms of contacts, messages, communications, things of that nature?
I did not.
Did you also look at Mr. Dietrich's and Ms. Vanderheiden's cell phone for any potential contact information or messaging between them and Mr. Burch?
Yes, I did.
And did you find any connection?
I did not.
You mentioned earlier the idea of location data. Can you tell us a little bit about why you were interested in location data?
For us at that point, location data would be able to place Mr. Burch at locations that we knew Nicole was likely at.
And when did you first become aware of the ability to utilize location data or data from a cell phone to determine the location of that cell phone?
In regards to this case?
Correct.
Early on in the investigation.
You were aware that of Google Dashboard and the type of location data that it provides?
That's correct.
Is that something you had picked up in a prior training?
Yes, it is.
Is that something that you have used in the past prior to this case?
Yes, it is.
What do you do in order to obtain data from Google for location purposes?
A warrant or subpoena would have to be written to Google's corporation requesting that data.
And was that done in this case?
Yes, it was.
And you were provided with a subset of data from Google to allow you to make determinations as to the location of the phone?
Yes, I was.
And can you explain a little bit about what Google Dashboard data is?
Sure. Google Dashboard is all of the information that Google collects about its users, whether it be internet history, locations that they were physically at, things they're interested in, news articles they've read, and Google retains all of that information.
And specific to data locations, how is that information collected and stored?
That information is collected in 3 different ways. Google is able to locate devices based on 3 different connection methods. The first being cell phone towers, being the least accurate. So Google will obtain the data direct from their users of cell phone towers that they were connected to at any time frame. And then they will retain that data. Google also is able to locate its users with GPS positioning based on applications that are on that phone using the GPS function of that device. Google also locates its users by what's called wireless network positioning. And that is based on Google's database of known wireless networks, where Google knows the physical location of those networks, and if a user is able to connect to those networks, they are able to determine that they have to be within a circumference of where that wireless network is. And they're able to determine accuracy for each of those 3 ways of positioning their users.
Does a user have to be logged into the network in order for it to generate a data point for wireless network?
They do not.
Can you explain, just from a user's standpoint, as you're utilizing your phone, how would you know that a wireless network is within reach?
Yes. So depending on how you have your phone configured, the way wireless networks work is they're constantly pushing out a broadcast signal to devices that are within a range of that wireless router. So depending on how your phone is configured, you might be notified by your phone that there's a wireless network in your area that you can connect to, or you may not, depending on your settings. You don't necessarily need to connect to that network to have communication with the network for Google to be able to put a position on your device.
Likewise with GPS, you mentioned that Google would register GPS coordinates if there's an app that is essentially requesting GPS or uses GPS coordinates. Do you have to be actively using an app in order for those GPS coordinates to register?
That app could be running in the background of the device. A user wouldn't specifically have to have it up on their screen for that app to be using the GPS function of that device.
You are aware of apps that exist that are constantly looking or regularly looking for GPS data, regardless of whether you're actively using that application?
Yes.
When you obtained the information from Google, did you analyze it?
Yes, I did.
How is that information provided to you from Google?
It's reported in a spreadsheet for each location on its own line with the date and time that that location was determined. how Google determined it, and how confident they are in the radius of that position.
So all of those data points are provided you directly from Google.
Correct.
From your standpoint, how easy or difficult is it for you to process the information that is provided to you by Google?
It's relatively simple.
How did you do that?
I used Google Earth software just to input the latitude and longitude coordinates of those specific locates.
As you were using that software to analyze the data on Mr. Burch's phone, did you locate any information of interest relative to his phone's locations during the relevant time period?
Yes, I did.
What did you observe?
I observed Mr. Burch's phone being at a bar on South Broadway. I observed Mr. Burch's phone traveling south down Broadway into De Pere. I observed Mr. Burch's phone traveling to Ms. Vanderheyden's residence on Berkeley. I observed Mr. Burch's phone traveling to the site where the body was found. I observed Mr. Burch's phone leaving the site where the body was found and traveling west on 172 and ultimately ending up back at his residence on Greenwood.
And you noted the locations of the observations. Did you also note that the times of the locations of those phones were consistent with the known time frame of Nicole Vanderheyden's disappearance and death?
Yes, I did.
Were you able to plot those points on a map and again create a demonstrative or a series of demonstratives using the data set that was provided to you by Google?
Yes, I was.
And what form did that demonstrative take?
It is a playable video showing the locations provided from Google and their associated times.
Did you also demonstrate maps?
Yes, I did.
And then with respect to 169, it actually is located on that thumb drive, or we have it stored on the computer. We've shown the contents of the thumb drive to the defense. What I would ask is that analyst Balin be allowed to play the video for the jury. Move it into evidence, and ask them to play it, and have it confirm that it is in fact the video that he created.
All right, so you're going to show, just so the record's clear, you're going to show what's been marked as 169 you have on your computer. You'll show it, and then the witness can identify it as his product.
Correct.
All right.
Is that video that you just watched accurately reflect the demonstrative video that you created for presentation in this case?
Yes, it does.
I would move for admission of that item into evidence, Your Honor.
Subject to cross, any objection to 169?
No, thank you.
All right, 169 is received.
Now, Analyst Balin, it's difficult to see from that video the specific time frames in which Mr. Burch's phone was at certain locations. Do you recall from your preparation in this case approximately what time on May 21st, 2016, Mr. Burch's phone is last located in the area of Richard Cranium's bar on Broadway?
I believe roughly 2:45 a.m.
If you were able to review your notes, would that allow you to refresh your recollection as to the specific time?
I don't know if I'd have that data available.
Initially in the video, it demonstrated Mr. Burch at the area of Richard Cranium's and then traveling to his residence. Is that consistent with the data that you plotted?
That's correct.
And the phone was at his residence for a brief time before heading down Broadway?
That is correct.
And do you know approximately what time Mr. Burch's phone arrived at the area of Berkeley Road?
I believe it was 3:01.
3:01 a.m. on May 21st?
That's correct.
16?
Our sidebar was just in reference to make sure there's no confusion about the data in these photographs and how they're going to be explained on the record. So Attorney Lassay is marking these photos, and when they're ready, they can be presented to the witness.
You know, Balin, I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibits 170 through 174. Can you describe as a set what those generally are?
These are positions for Mr. Burch's device based on the Google records.
At various time frames?
That's correct.
And those are generally all out in front of the residence on Berkeley Road, is that correct?
Yes, they are.
And specifically exhibit 170, what time frame is that?
3:01:01 a.m. on 5/21/2016.
And then exhibit 171?
3:04:03 a.m. on 5/21/2016.
Exhibit 172?
3:50:55 a.m. on 5/21/2016.
173?
3:52:26 a.m. on 5/21/2016.
And then can you explain what 174 is?
174 is a overlay on a map of every position in front of that address on Berkeley as provided by Google.
So there were several different data points. The first being the time of arrival, 3:01 at the Berkeley address, the last being 3:52 a.m., roughly the time of departure. But during that time frame, there's actually a number of different data points that you received?
Yes, there are many.
And the 174 overlays all of those?
That's correct.
I would ask that these be published for the jury and to allow Analyst Balin to explain them as they arise.
All right. First of all, any objection to 170 through 174, subject to cross, understanding or continuing objection, that as to these particular photographs?
No.
All right, so 170, 171, 172, and 173 and 174 are all received, and they may be published.
Analyst Balin, I'm showing what I believe has been marked as Exhibit 170. Is that an accurate depiction?
Yes, it is.
And can you first initiate or explain for the jury what the data point is involved there?
Sure. This data point was determined by Google for Mr. Burch's phone on 5/21/2016 at 3:01:01 a.m. You can see the location given in latitude and longitude. The size of the highlighted circle represents the accuracy that Google determined that position to be. The source of that position was determined by a wireless network that Mr. Burch's device had become in broadcast range of.
So Google tells you how they know he's at that location, source being Wi-Fi,
That's correct.
and then they also tell you what their accuracy is with respect to that location.
That's correct.
So essentially saying located anywhere within the green circle.
That is correct.
And based on the type of source of information, Wi-Fi, GPS, and cellular tower, the size of the circle will vary. Is that correct?
That is accurate.
Let's say just for the record, and the size of the circle is what, 232 feet? Or the radius?
So is that what that is, the radius? 232?
232.94 feet.
And it's 232.94 from the point of the arrow, correct?
Correct.
So essentially saying located anywhere within the green circle.
That is correct.
And the next exhibit? This is Exhibit 171, is that correct?
That is correct.
And the time of that particular data point?
3:04:03 a.m. on 5/21/2016.
And again, the source of that data point?
Wi-Fi again on this one.
And at Google, in that particular instance, is telling you that the accuracy is within 357.61 feet of the location?
That is correct.
So again, saying that the device is located somewhere within the green circle.
That is accurate.
You know why different Wi-Fi sources might have a different degree of accuracy?
Different manufacturers of these wireless access points could use different hardware and it's different signal depending on the band of the signal that they're using. There's varying degrees of what the range basically would be, that you'd have to be within a certain circumference of a wireless network. One network you might have to be within 50 feet, another one 350 feet, depending on the hardware that's being used.
So based on the actual device, the strength of the signal could extend further with some devices than it does with others?
That's correct.
And again, is it common that a phone would be seeking out connection points to wireless devices even if the phone's not being actively used?
That's correct.
So Mr. Burch doesn't have to be actively using the cell phone here to be connecting to those various Wi-Fis?
That's correct.
And Exhibit 172? What is the timestamp for 172?
3:50:55 a.m.
So it shows that the device is still in that general location during the time frame at 3:50 a.m. and 55 seconds, correct?
That's correct.
And again, the source of that information is again a Wi-Fi signal?
That is correct.
And that one again accurate to within 239.50 feet, and the circle would once again represent the area within which the phone must be found.
That's correct.
Can we just clarify the exact time? So that's 3:00 and then 55 seconds?
It's 3:50 in 55 seconds.
Next one. And Analyst Balin, is this Exhibit 173?
Yes, it is.
And the timestamp of 173?
3:52 in 26 seconds on 5/21/2016.
And again, the known source there is Wi-Fi,
That's correct.
and that accuracy is to within 311.68 feet.
That's correct.
And again, the phone would have been located somewhere within the green circle on that map.
That's correct.
And then finally, 174. What does 174 represent?
174 represents each location that Google determined that device to be at in this specific region on Berkeley Road. You can see there's many points, and they all kind of overlap.
When Google reported the data to you, is it reported to you in feet or meters?
It is reported in meters.
So then when you use the circles on the map, did you convert those to feet?
Yes, I did.
Did you use a calculation to do that?
Yes.
Did you create similar demonstratives for Hoffman Road where Nicole's body was found?
Yes, I did.
Analyst Bailey, I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibits 175 through 180. Can you describe what those are as a set?
These are demonstrative images of where Mr. Burch's phone is located in relation to where Nicole's body was found, based on the data from Google.
All right, I would move for admission of those exhibits and also request to publish.
Any objection to 175 through 180, subject to cross?
No.
Okay, 175, 176, 177, 178, 179, and Exhibit 180 are received. And they may be published at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor. Analyst Bailey. Exhibit 175. What is the timestamp on that exhibit?
3:58 and 23 seconds on 5/21/2016.
So that's 3:58 a.m., roughly 5-6 minutes after the last known point on Berkeley Road.
That's correct.
And the source of that particular data point
GPS,
and the accuracy of that.
32.81 feet.
And I'd note that's significantly more accurate than Wi-Fi.
Yes, it is.
Is that generally true of the GPS data points?
Yes, it is.
Do you know why that is?
It's a more precise calculation.
And 176. And the timestamp of that?
3:58 and 54 seconds a.m. on 5/21/2016.
And the accuracy of that particular location?
9.84 feet.
And the next data point? That's Exhibit 177.
4:01 and 46 seconds a.m. on 5/21/2016.
And the accuracy of that particular hit?
9.84 feet.
And then Exhibit 178.
4:02 and 18 seconds a.m. on 5/21/2016.
And the accuracy of that location?
9.84 feet.
And that appears to have moved closer out of the field from the previous location, is that correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Burch, his phone is leaving the field at that time.
That's correct.
And the next exhibit, 179, what does this indicate?
These are all of the locations that were determined by Google in that farm field on the south side of Hoffman Road.
And Exhibit 180.
180 shows two different data points, one on 4:01 and 31 seconds a.m. on 5/21/2016. The next 4:01:46 a.m. on 5/21/2016, both with an accuracy of 9.84 feet.
So again, the first data point is closer to where the body was located. The second data point closer to the exit of the field on Hoffman Road.
That's correct.
And there's roughly 15 seconds between the data points.
That is correct.
And did you calculate the distance between those 2 points?
I did.
And what was it?
Center to center, 82 feet
How did you do that?
with Google Earth.
So that would demonstrate that the vehicle traveled roughly 82 feet in 15 seconds.
That's correct.
In addition to collecting the various location data from Mr. Burch's activities on the 20th and 21st of May 2016, did you do anything else in terms of your analysis of the phone to attempt to determine if Mr. Burch actually had the phone with him during those time periods?
Yes, I did.
What things were done to confirm that?
All the data points that Google provided, I believe it was almost a month span, 16,000 different records were plotted on a map.
And you did that to compare to locations where you knew Mr. Burch lived?
That is correct.
In fact, during the very short time frame that we were able to demonstrate on the video, Mr. Burch returned to the Greenwood residence, or there's a data point consistent with the Greenwood residence, at about 2:38 a.m. and then again at the end of the video just after 4 a.m. that morning, correct?
That's correct.
So the phone data originates at the Greenwood address 11 p.m. on the 20th, returns to the residence at about 2:38 a.m., and then again finally returns after he's at Hoffman Road at 4:20 a.m.
That's correct.
Did you also confirm, in addition to using the data, did you look at any other information from the phone to show that Mr. Burch had been using it before and after these data points?
Yes, I did.
And what were you able to observe?
Text messages and call logs.
And those are text messages and call logs to people that we know are associates of Mr. Burch,
That is correct.
such as his girlfriend, Jordan Schuyler.
That's correct.
You indicated that you plotted several known data points over the course of the roughly 1 month time period where Google provided data. Did you compare Mr. Burch's phone data from the afternoon and evening of May 21st, 2016 to a known location that evening?
Yes, I did.
And where did the phone travel to?
It actually traveled out into Lake Michigan.
So at one point in time, there's actually a data point in the middle of Lake Michigan as if they had been fishing?
That's correct.
And is it down in southern part of Wisconsin?
Yes, it is.
That Greenwood address that we referenced earlier, that's the known address for Ed and Linda Jackson?
That's correct.
No more questions at this time, Your Honor.
You want to begin your cross, Attorney Sugar?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
Analyst Balin, focusing on the Google Earth images that we just saw in that video that we watched, when you see that red dot moving, showing on the video, that's not the exact location where the phone is located, correct?
It is not.
So like when we saw the red dot on a warehouse and the multiple houses when it was moving, that's just, really, that's where one of those green circles could come up?
That's correct.
Showing that it's somewhere in that area?
Yes.
So then when we focus on Berkeley Road, and the phone is there for a longer period of time, every one of those red dots that come up, that doesn't mean the phone is actively moving to each one of those spots, correct?
It does not.
And again, that's where we would have those green circles overlaid. It could be in any of those green circles at that time.
That's correct.
Jody, can we switch? So I'm going to just replay part of that video for you. I believe that is that 169, Dave?
I believe this is 169, and you're going to play
I'm
a portion of that?
just a portion. So this is at 2:48, I believe, and then I believe on exhibit 170, you were also able to note that that data point that I'll point to with my mouse in the middle of the screen, that 352, that was 352.26. Is that accurate?
Can you repeat which article you're referring to?
I believe it's 170 or 173.
Just for, so the record knows, right now you're showing a still photograph.
Right, it's paused at 2:48.
Okay,
So that's 352.26.
that's correct.
And then I'm going to play until 3:23 on Exhibit 169. So I stopped the video at 3:23. So that data point at 3:58, that means that that's about under a 6-minute drive, about a 5.5-minute drive.
Yes,
When you were watching that video, would you call that a direct route from Berkeley Road to that Hoffman Field?
yes,
And then I'm just going to play one section of that video again, starting at 3:10. So, for watching that video, would you call that a direct route from Berkeley Road to that Hoffman Field?
yes,
And then I'm just going to play one section of that video again, starting at 3:10. So, we'll play it at 3:11. So you see that data point right at, that's GV and Hoffman, correct?
yes,
And that says 3:56.
yes,
But then you notice a data point before it that also says 3:56.
yes.
So I'm just going to play from 3:11 to 3:23 again. So again, that was a direct route from that intersection to that field, correct?
Correct,
And that was under 2 minutes?
correct.
And just one more time, so when we saw those red dots in other places, that doesn't mean they're right in that place, just that general area?
Correct, so each,
Within that
Sorry.
green circle?
that's correct.
In your further investigation of this case, did you collect surveillance video from Greystone Ale House?
Yes, I did.
What did you do with that information?
I personally reviewed the surveillance video from Greystone Ale House.
And then did you log that in evidence?
I'm not sure if I logged it into evidence or one of the investigators logged it into evidence.
But you handled all of that appropriately?
Correct.
If you logged that property or that evidence into your property, would that show up on a Brown County Sheriff's Office property list?
Yes, it would.
And then would that be under your name?
Yes, it would.
If I show you a property list, would that help refresh your memory?
Yes.
So I'm showing you Exhibit 181, correct?
Yes.
And that's that Brown County Sheriff's Office property list?
Yes, it is.
And at the bottom, does that indicate that you would log the Greystone Ale House surveillance video into property?
Yes, it does.
And you followed all the proper protocols and everything?
Yes, I did.
You also noted you conducted a lot of analysis on cell phones in this case. Did you analyze any of the computers at Doug Dietrich's house?
I believe I examined a hard drive from Doug Dietrich's house.
Do you know how many?
I don't recall.
How familiar are you with Fitbit devices?
I'm aware of what they are and what they do on a high level.
At a what?
A high level,
What does that mean?
meaning I understand the basics of how they work.
Can you tell us more specifically how they work, like the mechanisms within them or how they communicate with the app?
They communicate with the app via Bluetooth connection.
And can you tell us how they send that data information from one to the other?
I cannot.
Can you tell us the complexities of the data in terms of how it's recovered or how it is stored?
I guess I don't understand the question.
So, can you tell us what device this specifically was that you examined?
Are you referring to the Fitbit device?
Yeah.
It was a Fitbit Flex.
Do you know, are those waterproof?
I do not know that.
Do you know how Fitbit stores their data?
Are you asking how it's stored locally on the Fitbit device or
No.
on the phone?
No, Fitbit themselves.
I do not.
Do you know how users can manipulate Fitbit data?
I do not.
So you don't know if you can edit the Fitbit data?
I do not know that.
What happens when you are not wearing a Fitbit device? Is that going to register steps?
I do not know.
Can you provide us the error rate of a Fitbit?
I cannot.
Are you aware of Fitbit communities dedicated to troubleshooting and fixing errors within Fitbits?
I am not.
Are you aware of how many Fitbit app updates there have had been?
I do not know that.
So if I were to have to update a Fitbit, or if somebody had to, and it says for a bug fix, can you describe to us what that means?
A bug in terms of software?
It would just say BUG fix. Can you describe what that is or what that means?
It'd be hard for me to speculate exactly what they are fixing in their update.
And then just very briefly, back to when you mentioned looking at Mr. Burch's phone data and the articles that he viewed involving this case. When was the last time that he viewed an article involving this case?
Can I refresh my memory by reviewing my report?
Absolutely. I think we can just show you the exhibit. I believe it's 168.
6/6/2016, 8:39 and 9 seconds a.m.
Do any of these articles tell you that Doug Dietrich was released from custody?
They do not.
So just very specifically on your knowledge from these articles viewed, Mr. Burch would have had no way of knowing that Mr. Dietrich was released from custody in this case?
Based on the data extracted from the phone, no.
I have no further questions.
All right, redirect. Officer Balick, you may be excused. You may step down. And are you asking that the witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
I would like to argue some things outside the presence of the jury.
All right. But in terms of this witness being excused,
Not yet.
you'd want him to, the sequestration to, order to continue?
Just for brief argument after the jury's excused.
All right. You may step down. Ladies and gentlemen, it's almost noon. It's time for our noon break. Why don't we reconvene at about 1:15? Again, do not discuss this case with anyone or review anything during the lunch break. We'll see you back at 1:15.